series was originally held in August and September of 2021. For the most recent guidance and information, please visit ODOT's Public Transportation Division website. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to your regional transit coordinator. They are always your #1 resource. Inquiries captured during the live webinars have been compiled into a comprehensive question and answer document, which can be found on the training website.
Good morning or good afternoon whenever you're watching this. I'd like to welcome you to the Grant Management Training Module 9 that's about COVID relief funding. The presenters are going to be me, Sharon Perenboom, and Miley Bowles. Miley's great work has enabled her to move on to another job, but she did record her portion before she left. We hear the word unprecedented a lot lately in the past year and a half. And with some of these things, there's unprecedented confusion surrounding the COVID thing. And then FTA has rolled out some relief funding programs that are also unprecedented confusion, I think. We're going to be discussing the relief funding. There are 3 packages that are involved that FTA has for us. The 3 acts that have come out of the pandemic are the CARES Act, and I'll tell you what that means later. That's the first one, followed by CRSSA, and most recently is ARP, which is a new program that we're still working on the details right now, and we'll have more details available soon. So this is the agenda for what we're going to cover. We're going to have a brief introduction to the relief programs, the CARES Act, the CRRSAA Act, the ARP, a little bit of a comparison among them, and then let you know about some resources. Each program is a little bit different and it can be confusing, but there are also a lot of similarities to these plans. First of all, there is a national emergency that resulted in these relief funds. These are in addition to any funding that you're already receiving. The enhanced match rates mean that all funds are federally funded at 100%. And that's common among all 3 programs. Oregon received over $55 million in all of the 3 programs combined. In this presentation, we're not going to be discussing the 5307 or tribal transit funds that are part of these relief fund packages because we don't actually distribute those. So we're going to be talking first about the CARES Act, and we're going to cover the eligibility, match, time period, funding amounts, and distribution. CARES stands for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, and it was signed into law in April of 2020. So there are some limits in eligibility that we're going to talk about. The eligible subrecipients are existing 53 subrecipients, and there are also new providers who could be eligible for 5311 money. All of the 5311 formula program participants received some CARES money, and some intercity bus companies also receive CARES money. There are a couple of new 5311 providers for the purpose of the relief funds at this time, and they're not automatically added to the formula program. If they want to join it, they'll need to apply for that. Limits and eligibility. Eligible expenses are basically all of the expenses that are currently eligible under the 5311 rules, and also all of the 5311 requirements apply. This would include reporting to the NTD, and also very notably, it's the drug and alcohol testing program. It has to remain in place. And there have been some challenges with doing these tests, mostly in the past, I think. But if there is a problem, FTA will deal with these on a case-by-case basis. And any exceptions to the program requirements would be covered under a special waiver from FTA. The match rate, well, as mentioned earlier, CARES is provided at 100% federal funds, and there's no local match required. The time period is for expenses incurred on or after January 20th, 2020. And the funds expire at the end of the grant agreement that PTD issues to you unless the grant is extended. These grants have pre-award authority, which means that you can incur expenses prior to the grant award, which is not what usually happens. From the FTA perspective, the CARES funds don't expire, but from the PTD grant perspective, they will expire at the end of their grant agreement unless the grant agreement's extended. The reason for that is that we don't want to be tying up funds in grants that are just going to languish if there's somebody else who needs the money now, and we do not write open-ended periods for grants. So that allows us to move the money on if there isn't currently any movement with the funds. So this slide talks a little bit about the transit funding amounts. The total relief funding under CARES was $2 trillion. The transit portion of it, as shown here, is $25 billion. And the rest of the picture is there where it went. This is more money than PTD has ever received at one time. It's a lot more money than we've ever received at one time. This huge windfall made it important for us to look at both the immediate needs to people and get the money out quickly, and then pause to distribute the rest of it more thoughtfully, both from PTD's perspectives and the subrecipients as well. This slide is going to talk about the distribution of the CARES funds and provide a little bit more of the details. The initial formula distribution was to 5311 formula participants, and it was approximately 1 year of what they received in the 1921 allocation. The goal was to distribute the funds as quickly as possible, and using the formula worked really well for that. It's an established methodology in line with what we're doing now, and so we didn't have any need for extensive meetings that could hold things up at a time when people really needed the money now. Needs-based awards were rolled out following the CARES formula on the application basis. Subrecipients then had more time to think about what they really needed, at least for the foreseeable future. Then, if they needed to, they could apply for additional funds later on, depending on what the circumstances were. Awards also include the required 15% allocation to intercity bus providers. Now, moving on to CRRSSA, which stands for the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, that was signed into law in December of 2020. And they decided that we'll call it CRRSSA. The eligible expenses follow the particular program, such as 5311 and 5310. Payroll and operations are covered under these grants, and that includes preventive maintenance and fuel, cleaning, PPE, and administrative leave. Intercity bus expenses can also be covered. Please notice that this does not include capital expenses. The CARES funds that we talked about earlier are the only relief of money that is available for capital expenses. The match rate, CRRSSA, is provided at 100% federal funds. There's no local match required. And as I said before, all the programs are 100% federal, so that's going to be pretty easy to remember. The time period is also expenses incurred on or after January 20th, 2020. And again, the funds will expire at the end of the grant agreement that PTD has with you, unless the grant agreement is extended. And it's for the same reason, even though FTA gives us longer, we don't want to tie up money in grants that when someone else might be able to use the money. Under CRRSSA, the total funding is $900 billion, and $25 billion of that is for transit. And when you look at the numbers below it, no, that doesn't add up to 25 billion. But there's some other aspects in that money, the 25 billion, including tribal distributions that we just left out for simplicity. And if you're interested in the details you can go to FTA's website but most of these programs that remain really don't apply to rural providers. Distribution, $135,190 goes to the 5310 small urban funds, and that's done via a formula to the small urban agencies. Another $166,000 in rural funds 5310 will go to, by formula, to the rural agencies who have not yet received any relief funds. There's another $2.4 million in 5311 funds that will be distributed in the future using a needs-based application process. ARP, same topics. It was signed into law in March of 2020, and it stands for American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. So it includes both 5311 and 5310, and it actually includes some other kinds of things that are not administered by us. So as mentioned before, this is a pretty new program, and so there are some things we don't know about it yet. So we're working on that. And in addition, it's possible that FTA may change its interpretation of the act as we go along. Hopefully not much, but it could happen. Eligible subrecipients, it's similar to CRSSA, including private providers of public transportation. Eligible expenses, this is operations and payroll again, which also includes the PPE, PM, meal delivery, vaccine transportation, administrative leave due to reductions in service, and other essential services. Again, no capital. Match rate, by now you probably figured this out, is 100% federal, no local match is required. The time period is also for expenses incurred on or after January 20th, 2020. And again, the funds will expire at the end of the grant agreement that PTD has with you unless you extend the grant agreement for the same reason. Technically, these grant funds are not allowed to PTD, public transit, in perpetuity like the other ones are. The federal funds actually do lapse September 30th of 2024. So the funding amounts, the total funding for everything is 1.9 trillion in these acts. And at the transit funding amounts at the national level is 30.5 billion. And Oregon gets 9.6 million. And you can see the breakout below that. And you probably don't want to listen to me reading out all these numbers that you can read yourself, right? So, yeah, here we go. The ARP Distribution Methodology, to be determined. There's a lot of work that you and we have had to do with these new funds and also keep our regular programs moving. Furthermore, the FTA guidance sometimes lags behind the funding announcements. So we're still working on it, and PTAC and other stakeholders are going to be involved in developing the methodology, and we hope to know more soon. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Miley. Again, she kindly did this before she left. So I guess take it away, Miley, recording.
Hello, so I'm going to talk about the comparison among the three programs on how the funds are distributed. And I apologize for showing you something that you probably can't read very well in a PowerPoint, but this is a comprehensive chart of the three programs, which sums up all in one place everything we've discussed about the distribution of the funds up till now. There's a link to this chart so you can review it later on your own and you'll be able to see the full chart and all the details. But basically, CARES is almost completely distributed, and the remaining 1.1 million will most likely be distributed in what we call our out year solicitation. So next year, or we'll start that in the fall. And that will be along with other programs such as 5339 and other programs. CRSSA 5310 has been completely distributed. CRSSA 5311 will be distributed again in our out-year solicitation. And we will be engaging PTAC and others on the methodology for distributing ARP, since there's still so much to learn about that, and we haven't really decided quite how we will be rolling those funds out. So this slide is on the comparisons for eligibility, and the chart is much easier to read. You can see the eligible recipients of the various relief funds listed here. For CARES, it's any agency who's eligible for regular 5311 or inner city who's gone through or will go through that startup process. For CRSSA and ARP, it's any agencies eligible for 5311, inner city, or 5310. Eligible expenses are listed here. You can see that only CARES includes capital, and this is for traditional capital projects like vehicle purchases. CRSSA and ARP is only for operations, but that is a rather broad category since purchase of supplies, including PPE and others, is included as an operating expense. As we've mentioned before, you will have access to the funds until grant expiration, or technically 60 days after grant expiration for expenses incurred prior to the expiration date of your agreement. On our end, CARES and CRSSA funds do not expire with FTA. You may have heard that ARP expires, but that expires September 30th of 2024, which means ODOT will have to have the funds awarded to us before then. And you can also see a comparison of the funds ODOT received on this chart. So we have some resources for you. We really like to point you directly to FTA's website and those links, since those are also our source for information and are continually being updated. Our website does have some good information on COVID funds. So there's a link there. And RTCs should be your first point of contact, especially since they are the most familiar with each of the regions and each of the provider needs and situations. Sometimes there are questions that are very specific. So those are, the RTCs are a great resource for that. We also have some other contacts if you need help with payments, agreements, or technical support. With these relief funds, there are extra reporting requirements that FTA has handed down. There may also be questions down the road when it comes to reporting to NTD and other places. So your support analysts are a great resource. If they don't know the answer, they will definitely point you in the right direction. And then I do want to give a plug for always using our ODOT PTD reporting inbox. If you do have questions, even if there's someone you're normally talking with, a support analyst, it's great to at least CC ODOT PTD reporting, because we all share that inbox. We check it regularly. If someone is out, your question will still be answered. And we just want to thank you for your attention. Hope you learned a lot, and please reach out if you have other questions.